share monitor 2. All right, let's go ahead and do this thing.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome to our Series 6 webinar that will guide you on a path to help you learn how to effectively study and use our material to the maximum. We will discuss common mistakes made during the exam and give you test-taking tips that will drive your success. I'm Dana Patkowski, Director of Strategic Sales and Training. I have been assisting students to achieve success with their financial training for over 20 years. During this webinar, we invite you to ask questions through the chat tool, and we will answer as many of them as time allows after the presentation. I would like to introduce you to my colleague, Adam James. Adam is a securities instructor teaching hundreds of students of Series 6, 7, 65, and 66. Additionally, he writes a curriculum for the Series 79 and 99 examinations. In the industry, Adam has touched most parts of our broker-dealer's operations and has the Series 4, 7, 24, 27, 55, 63, 79, and 87 licenses. Adam, will you now guide us through Kaplan's best practices for taking the Series 6 exam?
Thanks very much, Dana. I appreciate this opportunity to talk with you as you're preparing for your Series 6 examination. It shows that you're taking your studies seriously, that you're trying to find out what are the best methods of studying for this exam. As a little bit of background about myself, I want to introduce you why I'm an instructor for Kaplan Financial. Well, the reason is simple. I'm a Kaplan success story. I've passed 7 qualification exams the first time, not because of any special ability of my own, but by structuring my studies and Kaplan's materials to their fullest, using these best practices. I'm not alone in this. Over 1.5 million other students have passed doing the exact same thing. So let's go ahead and talk for a second about what makes the Series 6 challenging and what are the biggest problems that people face when studying for the Series 6. Well, the Series 6 is a limited registered representative license. It allows you to sell investment company products, things like mutual funds, and variable contracts, things like variable annuities and variable life. The examination is 100 multiple choice questions. So for every question, there's only 4 options, A, B, C, and D. It is a timed test with only 2 hours and 15 minutes available to you. Now, generally speaking, students do not have a problem with time. They have more than enough. However, you want to make sure that you pace yourself appropriately for this test. The passing rate is 70% or above. Well, I like to think about it from the other point of view. Instead of thinking I have to get 70% of all the questions right, think about this. You can get almost a third, 30% of all of these questions wrong and still come out with a passing score. While this test may be challenging, it is certainly a passable exam. Now, what are some units that students have greater difficulty with? Well, Unit 1 is the foundational material, securities markets, investment securities, economic factors. This is what everything else is going to have to be built off of in order to know what are the, for example, the risks of a separate account or of a mutual fund. Unit 2 talks about those investment company securities and the variable contracts, the very things that you will be qualified to solicit to the public. It's important that you have a firm grasp as to what these are, what characteristics they have, and especially what risks and potential returns do they have. Unit 3 deals with securities and tax regulation. You have to know the small details going into the securities markets and also the tax consequences of these investments. Now, the overall theme of the Series 6 is going to be the word suitability. That's the reason why we have a Series 6, is to ensure that you, as a registered rep, are making suitable investment recommendations to the public. Whenever you find a new product, you have to first think, what are the risks associated with this product? What are the potential returns? And which customers is it going to be most suitable for? Let's go ahead and jump into how you prepare for this test. How do we get into the actual studies of it? I find there to be 3 steps in your study approach. The first and foundational step is to read. You need to go through the LEM carefully and read all the material. The license exam manual has all of the information you would need to pass the Series 6. The second is to watch. Interact with an instructor, whether it be through a live or on-demand class. You need to see an instructor's presentation. You need to be able to ask questions. The third and keystone of your study program is to roll up your sleeves and get your hands dirty in doing as many practice problems as possible. It really doesn't matter how well you may understand the concepts that you learned in the license exam manual or that you reviewed in your class, unless you can apply it in a test situation, answering multiple choice questions and getting those questions correct. Let's talk about some of the tools that are available for your use in these 3 steps. The primary tools are going to be, first off, your LEM, the License Exam Manual. This is where you start your studies out. You need to start with a very careful reading of this book. You have instructor-led training, an ideal opportunity for you to interact with an instructor. Now, this is available in a live traditional classroom setting where you would come to one of our campuses and I would be able to teach you over the course of a couple days. But there's also an on-demand version available. The on-demand version is a recording of an instructor where you can watch those recordings going over the exact same information from the comfort of your own home or office computer. I want to emphasize one thing to you. If you have an on-demand class, you need to treat it the same as you would a traditional live classroom. You need to have your books in front of you, taking careful notes, and not be distracted by all of the cares of the world and the things that are going on around you. You need to act as if you were in a classroom to maximize its effectiveness. The Securities Pro Q Bank is the way that you will be able to practice your skills and hone your understanding of the concepts taught in both the class and in the LEM. This is available online at kfeducation.com and has several different aspects to it. The first is you can build your own quizzes, going over any specific unit. For example, when you finish Unit 1, you can do a quiz that only talks about the materials from Unit 1. When you've finished all of the units in the book, it's time to take weighted mock exams, where the quizzes will have material from the entire spectrum of what is testable on the Series 6. And it will be in the same weights as what you can expect on the actual exam. The third thing available to you is diagnostic reports, an unfortunately underutilized tool. The diagnostic reports allow you to go through and see which units are you struggling with. Every time you answer a question, whether it be correct or incorrect, the diagnostic reports will pick up on that, and they'll be able to give you a report telling you where are you doing well and where do you need extra work. Of course, when you look at these reports, it's going to tell you what do you need to focus more on, the areas that you're struggling with. Available also are the practice and mastery exams. These are for evaluative purposes only. Because they're for evaluation, finding out how you would score on the test should you take it that day, it's only available one time. If I took a practice exam twice, of course I would do better the second time than the first. Not because of any additional learning that I've done, but because I've seen the questions already. So make sure you use these understanding that it's only available once and it's intended to mimic the exam and see how you would score should you take it today. Some additional tools available to you include the interactive study calendar. A lot of our students have been out of school for some time and they aren't in the habit of studying. Well, the interactive study calendar allows you to put in the date that you'll be taking the exam, and it will build out where do you need to be leading up to that exam, giving you some structure to your studies. The comprehensive class notes is a notebook filled with all of the bullet points that the instructor, whether it be a live or an on-demand instructor, will be going through in their class. There's lots of white space, large margins in there. So take advantage of that and use this book as a resource to take notes in, to reinforce the concepts that the instructor is teaching and for review later on in your studies. The video library is available online as well, and it goes through a myriad of short vignettes talking about some of the more difficult or testable topics. Usually these videos are somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes long and is a great way to supplement your reading in the LEM to be able to understand these concepts that may be more challenging for your studies. We live in an incredibly dynamic regulatory environment. Securities rules, regulations, and the interpretations thereof change almost daily. Well, as a result, the test also goes through periodic changes. The Exam Tips blog and test alerts tell you what those changes are. It makes sure that you have the most up-to-date information available. The updates, addendums, and corrections is also a supplement for your LEM to make sure that you, again, have the correct and up-to-date information in your available for your studies. FAQs, of course, are a way for us to help you answer the questions before you even need to ask them. Let's go in and talk about some of these tools available to you and how we can best use them. The License Exam Manual is the very first tool that you should be using. You need to carefully read through this entire manual to understand all of the material that's in the Series 6. Well, you have to start this preparation by reading the introduction. You need to start with the introduction because it's going to help set the tone for the rest of your studies. It'll tell you what the prerequisites for the test are. How long do you have? What topics are covered in the exam and what weights can you expect to find each of those topics? This is going to be crucial in when you're deciding when you're budgeting how long you're going to be spending on each unit. It also includes important test-taking tips. The Series 6 is a standardized test, and so content isn't the only thing that you're being tested on. Your ability to answer these questions is also being tested, and there are certain points that will help you answer questions correctly in your test-taking skills. Once you finish the introduction, you get into the meat of the matter. You start going through all the content of what is going to be tested on the Series 6. You need to read this very carefully, spending enough time to fully comprehend the material covered in it. That's going to take several hours. This is not a book that you should just be skimming through, but one that you need to carefully read through. Whenever I write a LEM, the only thought that goes through my mind is, how can I convey this information to help a student get the question right? I'm not writing it as a textbook where I'm just giving you all the information and saying good luck. I'm writing this with the sole intention of you getting questions correct on the exam. Whenever I'm teaching a class, it's very apparent who has and who has not prepared themselves for my class by reading the book. Those who have read it are always engaged. They're asking questions. They're making comments. They're taking studious notes. Those who have not, and I can tell this within just the first hour of class, are those who might start paying attention to other things, looking at their phone more frequently, or are really starting to get discouraged and stop participating in class. No one wants you to fall behind. It's important that you start your studies off with a solid foundation of reading that LEM. As you go through it, you're going to find quick quizzes and unit tests. Now, these quick quizzes are intended for you to have a quick way of assessing, do I understand what I just read? Occasionally, when I'm reading a lengthy book, I will find that my mind gets distracted, starts wandering, and I think about family responsibilities or things that I have to do at work, and I'll come to the realization that I didn't really read the last 3 pages, even though I had been moving through with my eyes. Quick quizzes are a great way to assess how well do you understand the information that was just presented and make sure that you're keeping up with the pace of the book. At the end of each unit, you'll also have unit tests, which provide additional questions mimicking those that you might see on the test to see if you have understood the materials that was presented in that unit. After you've gone through the book, it is important that you follow up your studies with additional questions coming from our Q bank. If you ever find yourself in a challenging spot, you don't quite understand the concept that the book is trying to convey, All is not lost. Go ahead on the KF Education website and take a look at the video library. And chances are you're going to see a video that will pertain to that topic. Now the video library is included in both the Essential and Premium packages, and as I mentioned before, is a series of short vignettes dealing with these difficult or testable concepts to ensure that you may understand it from the words of an instructor. Take advantage of this. If you're having trouble with a concept, re-watch the video. There's no limit to how many times you can watch it until the bell goes off and you understand the concept and you're able to answer questions correctly on it. Additionally, I mentioned before, we're in an incredibly dynamic regulatory environment. Rules are always changing, and that means the test is changing as well. Take advantage of our test exam tips blog. This is a blog where a content editor is able to publish any new changes that are affecting the test and what it means for you. In this case, as you see on your screen, we have a major rule change just last year in communications with the public. Everything changed in this rule. The definitions of what the different types of communications are, what the review requirements are for each type of communication. This was a major change, and as such, we have a content editor who went through and made sure that the new information was explained and that you know what was being tested on right now, including even some practice questions as to what you could expect to see on the exam. Make sure you follow this frequently. There's an RSS available with it, so you can subscribe to this blog on your preferred blog reader. That way in the morning, as you're eating breakfast and looking through the news of the day, you can see, oh look, there's a new change in the Series 6, and you'll know exactly what the new rule implies and how it's going to be translated on the exam. Now, as you're going through your whole study process, you need to be doing questions. You need to be testing yourself continually. That's where the Securities Pro QBank comes from. You need to gain a comfort level in every unit before you move on to the next, and that you can answer a number of these questions correctly. Now, perfection is not the goal while you're in still the learning phase. You're not evaluating yourself. You're trying to learn the material and solidify the concepts in your mind. Starting off with the scores that are in the mid to high 60s is not a bad starting off point. It's a great place for you to be able to propel yourself into better scores, answering additional questions. But the key thing here is that you are still learning. Making mistakes is part of the process, so long as you learn from those mistakes. Go through the questions and look at the answers and rationales as to why the correct answer was indeed correct. Learn from any mistakes you make and don't make them again. As long as you go through that, you're going to maximize your study efforts with the QBank. Now, what should you be using the QBank for and how often? Well, you need to be using it continually. After every unit, do 2 40-question Securities Pro QBank quizzes. This is going to give you a wide variety of questions that you may see on the exam. These questions are built in both to be similar in content and in format as what you'd see on the actual exam. Periodically, go back and review all of the information that you've already learned. Say at the end of Unit 4, you need to still remember everything that was talked about in Unit 1. So do a cumulative exam, a 100-question comprehensive exam on the information you have already learned. This is going to help reinforce the old concepts and make sure that your whole mind is reminded of the entire spectrum of material covered in the Series 6. Now, a word of advice. Don't get too overwhelmed or bogged down in any one unit. It's easy for us to say, I can't move on to Unit 3 until I'm getting 70 or 90% in Unit 2. Don't get into that mindset. You need to keep a momentum going. You need to keep moving forward. You'll always have a chance to review and go over that same material again in the future. But don't become so bogged down that you neglect later sections in the book for preference of earlier sections. Once you've gone through the entire LEM, you've been doing these QBank quizzes, it's time for you to really test yourself on the entire spectrum of the Series 6's content. This is where the weighted mock exams come into play. Weighted mock exams, as I mentioned before, are going to cover all the material, but it's going to be in the same weights as what you would expect to see on the actual test, giving you a much more realistic feel of what the test is going to be covering. Now, there are thousands of questions in the QBank. Take advantage of all of them. You need to be completing at least 10 of these weighted mock exams prior to class. It will help you prepare you to know where are you doing well, where are you struggling, and what questions do you have prior to meeting with your instructor. If you go through this and you're using your diagnostic reports, you'll be absolutely prepared to take notes and to review this information in your class, whether it be live or on demand. The practice and mastery exams, as I mentioned to you previously, are for evaluating yourself to see how you would score on the test should you take it today. I've always taken the practice exam only a few days before the test, and I've always scored within just a few points of what I got in the practice exam. I find it to be very representative of the actual test in terms of both content, format, and difficulty. Use this as a wonderful gauge to see where you are right now. I recommend taking the practice exam prior to class so that you can really see where you are in your studies and how well would you expect to score on the exam. Once you've finished your 10 weighted mock exams and your practice exam, it's time for you to attend your class. Now, the class should be scheduled roughly 7 to 10 days prior to your exam. This is going to allow you a week to be able to tie up any loose ends, but it's also not so far in the past that you will have forgotten things from your test. It gives you a wonderful just a week to be able to review and to move on with the test. So when you're in your class, there's a few notes I want to make. First is you need to be taking careful notes of what the instructor is talking about. This is going to help reinforce the concepts in your mind as you write them down, and it's going to provide you an additional study source for that last week between your class and your exam. Make sure to do any homework assignments that you're given. Additional questions are always going to be in your best interest. Do as many problems as you can. And the nice thing with your class is that your instructor will be able to tailor any homework assignments to the needs of your class. Take advantage of that. Now, once you've finished your class, it's now time for you to finish up your study preparation. What do you do in that last week? Well, you start off by completing the mastery exam, which is more challenging than the practice exam. Once you've done that and you've challenged yourself, go through, keep quizzing yourself and testing yourself, making sure that you are comfortable with answering questions and that you are consistently scoring in the 80s. This is going to be with both regular quizzes that you may be focusing on a particular topic and weighted mock exams where you're going through the entire spectrum of the Series 6. Of course, if there's any areas that you're struggling with, go back, review chapters of the LEM or certain pages of the LEM. Go back and review your notes from class. That's why you wrote them down in the first place. Now, I would not recommend going back and rereading the entire LEM. I don't think that's going to be beneficial for you in that last week of studies. However, going back and rereading a few pages here and there absolutely can help solidify a concept. It can help make things clearer for you and help you get test questions right. You've now gone through the whole spectrum of your studies. You're now ready for your test. Let's just review once more time what the 3 stages of your study program were. First, you build a solid foundation of reading the LEM carefully. Second, you've interacted with an instructor, whether it be in person or through the instructor link email access and watching the videos online. The third thing, and you've been doing this throughout the whole process, is taking questions, practicing as many practice problems as possible. That's the keystone of your studies. It's what's helping keep everything else together. Let's talk about some of the tips that will help you out now on test day. I mentioned previously that this is a standardized test, and content is going to be a major portion of this. However, with any standardized test, there are certain test-taking skills that will help you out as well. Well, the first one seems trivial, but it's important that we discuss. It's read the full question. Doing this simple thing is going to take care of a lot of other issues you may come across. One, it's going to help you know exactly what the question is asking. You have to make sure you're answering the right question and not the one you think should be getting asked. It's going to help you find the relevant information. In many of the questions you'll be given, there will be more information than you need to answer it correctly. Be able to filter out that extraneous or distracting information. Look for any keywords or phrases in the question that will help identify what's being asked and what the correct answer will be. Look out for hedge clauses as you're reading the question. If, not, all, none, except. I'm going to pay special attention to the word except. This is a question that's going to have counterintuitive logic. If we're looking at 4 multiple choice answers, well, we're generally looking for the 1 true and disregarding the 3 false. In the case of an except question, all of the following are true except. Then we're looking for the 1 false answer and disregarding the 3 true answers. Make sure that you pay careful attention to any of these modifiers or hedge clauses. Too often students answered the question incorrectly even though they knew the right answer. Occasionally, as you go through the test, there's going to be certain items that you just have to memorize key information. For example, settlement dates. When does a trade settle? Is it on T plus 0, 1, 3, 5? What is it? Unfortunately, some of these details are going to have to be memorized. There's no easy way of getting through it. Now, this is a conceptual test. There are occasionally mathematical questions asked. However, if a question can be asked either mathematically or conceptually, generally it's going to be asked conceptually. However, you will occasionally find math problems on there. Because there is math on there, you may need to use a calculator. It's only very basic math. Add, subtract, multiply, and divide. I highly recommend, if you ever have math problems, use the calculator, even if the question seems trivial. I'm fairly good with math, but if I had the question, what's 3 plus 5? On my test, well, I would take my scratch paper that's provided to me, I would write 3 plus 5, and then I would punch it into my calculator to make sure that, yes, indeed, it is 8. I'm going through a bit of anxiety, and I have some nerves going on test day, and I don't want to have any careless mistakes. Make sure you use every resource you have available to you. I want you to also beware of changing answers. This one I want to re-emphasize. Beware of changing answers. If you have an answer that you want to change, before you do it, make sure you know you're changing an incorrect answer to the correct one. Otherwise, leave it be. Trust your instincts and move on. Don't go back and start second-guessing yourself. Otherwise, it's going to all too frequently lead you to choosing an incorrect answer. Too often I've had a student come back to me and say, Adam, I missed the test by only a few questions. And when I ask were they changing answers, a very common answer is, you know what, I wasn't for a while, but then I started changing a bunch of them. Too often that has happened, where students have second-guessed themselves and it has cost them points. The last thing I want to mention is to pace yourself. Remember, this is a timed exam. It's not a sprint. It's more of a marathon. You want to make sure you take enough time for each question. There's no extra points for finishing quickly. So take the time that's provided to you. Most students do not have a problem with time. They usually have more than enough left over. However, you do want to keep an eye on both sides. You don't want to be going too fast. You want to give each question its due credit. However, you don't want to be spending 10 minutes on each question. You'll be overthinking it and you'll be running out of time quickly. Make sure you pace yourself. This is also something the QBank will help you with. As you're going through the questions, you're going to notice down at the bottom there is a timer available. This will let you know how much time are you spending on each question. Are you doing okay time-wise? Measure yourself occasionally and make sure that you're in a comfort zone. Make sure you pace yourself on the test. As you've gone through the test, if you've been doing your practice problems and you've been doing the study solution that we've just talked about, you shouldn't have nearly the same stress as you otherwise would. As soon as you get into answering questions, you'll be in a comfort zone. You've been doing hundreds, if not thousands of questions before the test. Doing another 100 is not going to be a big deal. It'll be where you're used to doing if you've been taking enough practice problems. You want to make sure that while you do have some stress that day, and that's good, it will keep you sharp and focused on your task at hand, that you don't become bogged down or overburdened by your anxieties. Let's just review one last time the 3 steps of your test preparation. First, you need to read the book. Second, you need to interact with an instructor. Third, you have to take practice problems throughout the whole process. Follow this, and you will join me and millions of other students in successfully passing your qualification exam. Again, I would like to thank you for coming out today. This is a great opportunity for you to begin your test preparation. I wish you the very best of luck in your test preparations and in passing your Series 6 examination.